Welcome to this week's episode of Future Fridays, where we chat about future tech headlines from the week. I'm your host, Wiz, and you can find me on Twitter at WhimsicalWiz. Today we have three lovely guests who I'll have each go around and give a short 280-character intro. And we also have Yael joining us, who's a cartoonist, and my girlfriend, who will be doodling live for us. You can find her on Instagram at Yael Cecilia, which you can see on the slides. So maybe, Jason, we'll start with you, just because you're on the left of that slide there.
Sure. Hey, guys. My name is Jason Feifer. I'm the editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur Magazine, also host of a few podcasts. The most relevant, I think, for the audience here is Pessimist's Archive, which is a history show about why people resist new things. Each episode, we look at the moment something new is introduced that scared people, because everything new is scary to people. But in the past, we're looking at bicycles, novels, cars, chess, coffee. Refrigerators was the one that came out yesterday, and trying to understand why it freaked everybody out as a way of understanding how innovation takes place and why people resist it and how they eventually overcome it. So looking forward to the chat today. I have to admit, because I have kids and work and we're all crammed in a little house, I've done no prep. So I look forward to seeing the future with you right now.
Nice. That's awesome. Danika, do you want to go next?
Yeah. Hey, I'm Danika Laszuk. I run BetaWorks Camp at BetaWorks Ventures, which is our thematic, super early investing program. I also run a new program at BetaWorks called Beta Lab, and that is our call for entrepreneurs and builders and other interested folks who want to fix the internet, because it's gotten pretty broken as of lately. And I think a lot of that, if you weren't paying attention and it hadn't come to light for you in the last 4 years, it certainly is right now, as we all try to figure out how to live on the internet full time. So that's me.
Awesome. Mike?
Hey, I'm Mike Dempsey, partner at Compound. We're early stage seed, pre-seed, venture fund investing in North America and Europe across a bunch of different thesis areas related to emerging technologies.
Awesome. So today we've got 5 fun headlines from the week that we're going to chat about. All 5 of them came from a newsletter that I work on called This Week in Creative Technology. Every week we send a roundup of the most fun and interesting things in creative technology. There's about 30 of them. Today we picked 5 that we're going to chat about. Anyone watching can sign up. It's just bit.ly/join Future Fridays. So we'll jump into the first one. So this is one of the headlines from the week. Surveillance company says it's deploying coronavirus detecting cameras in the US. So gist of the article is that there's a security company called Athena that basically hooks into existing security camera systems. And previously what they've been doing is identifying weapons using AI. So they can identify guns, knives, those kind of things, and send alerts to security teams. In the wake of COVID, they've basically come up with a way where you can also hook up thermal cameras, detect whether people have fevers, and alert security staff to hopefully alert them and let them know or send them home or whatever it might be. They're hoping to deploy these in places like airports, grocery stores, hospitals, other large organizations, those sort of things. So let me ask you guys, I mean, this isn't the first time that we've seen surveillance technology purported for greater good. China already uses thermal cameras pretty extensively and has actually used them during this pandemic. We've also seen things like law enforcement using cell phone location data for ages. These next couple of headlines that we're going to look at all sort of look at how technology is starting to enter our lives in more of a surveillance-y type way. How can we ensure that these new technologies don't infringe on our civil liberties and move us closer to just being another surveillance state?
I mean, I think uses like this are the opposite of ensuring that we maintain our civil liberties. And I think, it's, I think it'll be really interesting to watch and see how people feel, right? We talk a lot about, I'm sure you guys talk a lot about how much people care, right? We talk a lot about wanting to maintain personal privacy and not sharing our data, and we share it freely, constantly, all the time with lots of companies that we aren't even aware that we're sharing with. And I'm curious after something like this, if people will continue to feel that way and act differently, or realize, fuck it, it would be great if this didn't happen, and whatever you need to take of mine, just like have it, because I've been stuck in my house for a month. I don't know, I'm curious about sort of how public sentiment goes in that.
That's a really compelling question to me, because I've been thinking a lot about the systematic and structural changes that are going to come out of this. As a guy whose podcast is kind of focused on looking back at history and seeing how past conversations that are very similar to the ones we have today played out, it can give you some sense of what's coming. And something this big, especially if this goes on for months and months, like, it's funny to look at that photo that you got up there. I haven't seen people that close to each other in weeks, like what we see in that photo. But you look back at, I was just talking to a medieval historian about the number of structural changes that came out of the Black Death. And they were so profound that they, at this point, hundreds of years later, you just think of them as the foundation of the way that we understand the world, right? Like the merchant class and the basic relationship between employer and employee came out of the Black Death. The understanding of a world that is unknowable came out of the Black Death. So I think that we're looking now at all sorts of interesting structural changes that are going to take place. And I think, Danika, you're actually totally right here that we could see, depending on how this goes, a sense that technology can keep people in check in a way that people can't do. I mean, like if I want to walk outside now and assure myself that I am not going to come in contact with someone with coronavirus, then actually the idea of a camera that can steer me clear of that is a little comforting right now. And so what is that going to mean if we have months and months of this and people completely shift how they understand privacy?
Mike, you write a lot about second order and third order effects. Have you thought much about what that looks like for COVID, and specifically sort of like the sinister ones? Like, I think a lot of people have talked about the positive ones, right? Like, we're all being accustomed to work from home. We're spending more time with our family. Like, maybe this will continue on. What does it look like on some of the darker side of things?
I mean, there's a lot of really dark, some of which are like not political waters I want to wade into on the internet. But I think like with this, it's interesting because kind of like Danika was saying, like you're running into, as a country, well, first we were about to see the largest A/B test in history between the UK and the rest of the world, when the UK was basically going to be like, we're going for herd immunity, let's do this thing. And then they backtracked once they understood anything about what was happening. And then the secondary thing that I think we're starting to see now is a second test of like how people say things, but how much do they actually believe them when it comes to like disrupting their lives. And I think the most obvious way we can look at that today is Trump's view on when to put the economy back into motion. And like any scientific
April 12th.
Yeah, any scientific viewpoint will say like if we go at Easter, it's just a net neutral viewpoint to have. And so I think this is kind of similarly of like if there's very obvious downsides to unleashing or having the toothpaste out of the tube proverbially around thermal detection of people, and then how that cascades into other types of monitoring of people, as we've seen in China and other places. But I think that when people are looking at it relative to the only way in which we can get the economy back going, the only way in which we're going to remove this 30% plus unemployment that we could see in the country very quickly, and all the secondary, tertiary effects that come from that, are to start to do these surveillance level things. I think people, especially the average American, which I will say is like on a net average basis versus the rest of the world, like way more selfish than a lot of other citizens, are probably going to be okay starting to give up these things. And on the other side, you might have some areas of government that see this as an opportunity to implement some practices that might be difficult to implement otherwise. And I mean, we're already seeing this play out in smaller ways with like even the the stimulus package from the other day, where there was arguments on or accusations on both sides of both Republicans and Democrats saying that they were trying to broker totally non-related things to COVID into this deal to push their agendas. And so if that's just like a sneak peek of the first $2 trillion, like what is it going to be if we're 4 months later and we're still having a crashing economy with ups and downs in the market like we have today?
Totally. We're going to move on to the next.
Okay.
We're going to move on to the next headline. I just want to keep us on time. Before we move on, we're going to go to our cartoonist and see what kind of fun stuff she came up with for this topic. Nice. I think we got a new whatever happened to privacy. Nice. Everybody. That's a great one. Awesome. Cool. Move on to the next topic. It is AI computer chip smells danger, could replace sniffer dogs. So what this article is about is that researchers from Cornell and Intel have produced a new neuromorphic chip called Lohi that reportedly makes computers think like biological brains. I read a bit about these chips actually. So the specific use case that they've been testing on has been trying to replicate olfactory bulbs, which are the parts of our brains that process smell, specifically link smells to memories actually is how it works. These new type of chips can be used for all kinds of crazy things and can like compute some cases 10,000 times faster than other chips. I don't know a lot about chips, but like I kind of got it. And they can like rewire themselves as well, which is interesting. This specific use allows the chip to smell dangerous chemicals, bombs, poisons, those sort of things. And the idea is that one day they may be able to replace sniffer dogs in some of those duties. So similar to the previous headline, another example of technology being used to ramp up surveillance in a way. I guess my question to you guys, kicking it back off, is are these kinds of things making the world better for us ultimately? I mean, there is a world in which if, we have these AI sniffer chips that are able to detect threats at a way better level than we do today, and it saves us from all kinds of terrible things, there's good there, net good. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think that that's true if you can trust the power systems. And I don't know if we exist in that world right now, right? I mean, like not putting dogs in danger sounds great if we're talking about bombs or dangerous chemicals. If we're talking about smelling diseases or sick people, I think, we go back to this, maybe personal privacy, maybe like what's the fallibility of it? How explainable and understandable is the algorithm that it's using? Who made that algorithm? How do we hold them responsible for the false positives that it might, might identify? How good is it at detecting smells? If we're again talking about humans across like the massive differences in humanity in terms of what, I'm sure we all smell really different to a highly tuned computer chip, is it like a model problem maybe?
Yeah. I feel like this, like there's an impending wave of like, how do we use machine learning to detect signals that humans can't parse very well? And on imagery, it's easier to do. On like qualitative signals, it's a little harder. I think like the first order thing we're seeing right now in research is detecting emotional state, or whether that's lying or happiness or sadness or whatever. And all of the data that comes back from that thus far is that it's filled with bias based on who builds the model. The data is not nearly robust enough. And like, it's a really slippery slope to try and implement something of like someone's lying or not. Just somehow we managed to implement like lie detector tests for a bunch of reasons, but that is probably one of the most failed implementations of using technology to like understand human emotion ever, arguably. And so I think that these types of things, because they're less understood, are actually more dangerous, because those that are likely going to potentially put these things into place will have very little understanding outside of what is told to them. And a lot of people just take at face everything they read about AI. And so my general view on a lot of the qualitative related things around AI that are like mission critical or human critical is pretty bearish for the short term.
This is also another example of machines becoming superhuman, which is kind of interesting. Do you all have any views on how humans might start to augment ourselves with these kind of technologies in the far off future? Like if we have chips that can smell better and like cameras that can see better, is there a world where we start to augment our senses and selves with this kind of technology in the far off future?
Before we get there, we could also fill in some of the gaps that people have. This is where I was going to go with this. So fun fact, I don't have a sense of smell. My olfactory nerves have been fried. They have been since I was a child. I don't remember a time in which I could smell. And therefore, I also can't taste food, because when you like what you think of as the experience of fully tasting food is primarily driven by your sense of smell. Your tongue only does sweet, salty, sour, bitter. And then like the nose, the olfactory nerves are what turns it into chocolate, from sweet to chocolate. So, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, is there a kind of smell version of a cochlear implant that we can have where, there are many, many millions of people who lose their sense of smell for one reason or another. Everything from a brain tumor to nasal polyps can knock out your sense of smell. And fun fact, also the coronavirus is knocking out people's sense of smell. It is about right now, scientists are seeing it as one of the very earliest, if not the earliest symptom. So if you suddenly see or discover that you have a loss of a sense of smell, you should self-isolate immediately. So this is technology that before we go turning ourselves into RoboCop, I think we really could actually use a lot of this technology to just fill in gaps for people, which would be great.
Any other thoughts on human augmentation in the future?
It's coming. It'll happen pre-birth, post-birth, and even later. I have a pacemaker. Like, in some ways, I'm human augmented, right? Like, there's a machine that keeps my heart going. And so I think that only will get better. And I'm super glad that exists. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't be very active. I think it's just like a continual progression, and probably the use cases will seem scarier and scarier at first. And Jason will document it, 50 years from now on his podcast about all the things we're talking about today.
Can't wait.
Awesome. We'll now switch over to cartoon. That's a great one.
Yeah. Fun fact, police dogs began in 1899 in Belgium. That was just part of the podcast that I did. So we haven't actually had them for very long.
Oh, wow. That's crazy. Cool. We'll move on to next topic. Is AI device turns coughing sounds into health data for flu and pandemic forecasting. So the gist of this article is that researchers have invented another surveillance device powered by machine learning called FluSense, and it is able to detect coughing and crowd size in real time. And the idea is that if you can understand who's coughing and take that as a sample of that population based on crowd size, then you can start to take that data and use it to monitor flu-like illnesses and flu trends. The envisioned use is in hospitals, healthcare waiting rooms, and large public spaces like airports. You can start to hopefully be able to forecast things like seasonal flu and maybe other viral outbreaks before they happen. I'm going to move this away from surveillance state and take it in a different direction. Something that was interesting for me reading this was cool technology, obviously, but how do we actually get this commercialized and get people using it? Danika, let me ask you, what sort of resistance do camp companies face when they're trying to replace these like very ingrained old world ways of being with new crazy technology that probably is better?
Figuring out who cares enough and has budget enough to pay for it. Right? So like, where does the customer sit and I think that's for a lot of the really interesting novel technology that we see that's just turning into a product. That's the hardest thing. So is this public health agencies, hospitals, is it schools, and schools don't have money, so it's not schools. Where would be the place that somebody feels like this is going to save them money? I don't know, I would love you guys to weigh in, but I don't see a lot of money spent motivated by public good. It's, it's commercial motivation. So it's got to either save money or time or make some part of the supply chain of, fighting this. Obviously, we are in a moment where we're feeling it very acutely. And so maybe there's a different kind of motivation that comes out, but that's the thing that I think most of the really new, interesting technologies we see struggle with.
Yeah, I would imagine it'd probably be like in this case, like payers who can say like fewer people will go into the insurance system and cost them money because of longer drawn out flu. If you believe that going to certain hospitals where they have a large number of flu-like instances can create a bigger problem. Yeah, that's a healthcare procurement and commercialization is tough.
Yeah, I was thinking insurance companies were the first thing that I thought of as well. Though I just wondering what possibly changes and whether these kind of economics change if the thing that we're experiencing right now is not a one-off event. Just keep going back to history. I mean, the Middle Ages had something like this every few years. This was just a completely constant, common experience that some sort of epidemic would wipe through and knock out 3% of the population. If that starts happening here, if COVID-19 turns into COVID-20, and also if global warming just continues to melt the ice and release viruses from a million years ago, we might suddenly have a lot of reason and a lot of a different kind of economy behind these ideas of tracking sickness and being able to respond to it proactively.
Mike, let me ask you, all of these headlines we've been looking at have been using AI in the headlines to pump them. In your experience with startups actually coming and pitching you, of those that use big AI headlines, are they actually doing crazy artificially intelligent things, or is a lot of it just fluff?
A lot of it is. A lot of it is like my thing is always like if it's something and we use AI, I'm always like that's like the and we use AI thing I don't really buy. But a lot of it is like using off the shelf stuff at this point for many use cases. Probably a lot is I try and just not take those meetings generally, but yeah.
I feel like the phrase machine learning has sort of replaced data science of, a couple of years ago. Like, sure, if you're building something, new technology, you're probably using a bunch of machine learning tools. But yeah, what is new and novel about it? Right.
Yeah, I guess we're at a place where the off-the-shelf technology is so good and well understood that it's not really about making new models anymore. It's just about, can you leverage them to do new and interesting things? Like this company that's using it for identifying coughing sounds. I assume that they're just training something on coughing sounds and being able to pick it up with like a standard microphone, right?
Maybe what could be interesting in this is if they can take a pretty noisy signal in and distinguish different coughs in the noise and be able to sort of zone in on, this could also be scary, but like who made that cough? How many people are in the room from the noise? Like there's a lot I can imagine. I don't think, that's, or I haven't seen really, really good demos of that yet. I've seen some early stuff. I'm sure, Mike, you've seen more, but being able to, because if it's in a large room, there's going to be so much noise in that input.
Yeah, one of the things in the article I think they said was that they wanted to try and test it in different rooms, which like is a pretty terrifying initial thing to have said in the news, because they should have tested in a few different rooms before they got all the press. But such is life.
Cool. We will move on to Cartoon Dan.
That's all I got.
That's good.
Good, I applaud it. I like it.
Thank you.
Really good.
I wanted to do something about the loser cough of 2002, but I didn't really from that one. I'll let you guys think of that one.
Awesome. Cool. Move on to the next topic. Is YC startup Felix wants to replace antibiotics with programmable viruses. So the gist of this here is that bad bacteria are becoming more resistant to antibiotics. We've all heard from our doctors, make sure that you take the full course of this so that we can prevent from more bacteria becoming immune. Felix is taking a new approach where they're programming viruses to kill off specific bacteria. the science of that isn't new. It was discovered in 1915 first, but it never actually took off at the time because antibiotics just became popularized first. Mike, I know that you've spent a lot of time in healthcare. Why are we so slow to make changes? Is this just a case of if it ain't broke, don't fix it? Or do we just suck at repositioning giant ships in general?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say I'm not nearly as good on the regulatory side of healthcare, but I think a lot of this has to do with like the incentive mechanisms in healthcare have been fairly broken in the United States for a while. And so I chalk up most of the like, why didn't this happen sooner? Usually to that, like incentives between either insurance companies, healthcare companies, pharmaceutical companies, et cetera, being built on the idea of treatment or being built on the idea of continual recurring revenue streams over long periods of time, not built on the idea of prevention or quick solving. Versus if you have like a national healthcare system, it's much more likely that you could be more centric on getting whatever done as quickly as possible to keep people out of your system to save you money. So that's like my take on like most things in healthcare, but I usually actually lean on one of my partners I bring in the healthcare stuff that I think is like fun and interesting. And then he's like, no, this is dumb for these reasons, regulatory wise. And I'm like, all right, cool.
So then that makes me wonder, this is a conversation actually I was just having yesterday with Alex Stapp of the Progressive Policy Institute, was how much of what's happening now might alter permanently the regulations around healthcare. I mean, like a lot of basic stuff right now has shifted. You are now allowed to talk to your doctor over Zoom. That was not something that you could have done a couple of weeks ago. I'm waiting for the regulatory capture policies around me not being able to get a new set of contacts because I haven't gotten my like eyes looked at in a year. I'm waiting for that to go away so that I can get new contacts while I'm holed up here. I'm like really annoyed at that regulatory capture. So the question is, if this goes on long enough and more regulations are dropped so that we can see more innovation in healthcare, do those regulations just spring right back to life as soon as we've tackled the problem, or are we in a new regulatory environment? What do you guys think?
I would guess new regulatory environment for a lot of these things, just from other smart people that I know in healthcare that seem to have that viewpoint. I think that we've started to see even some things around like outcome-based care even start to shift some of the smaller, slower regulatory incentive problems, at least on the healthcare side. I think it's one of those things of like once people have an easier way to access something, they're not going to go back, and I don't see a reason why we would.
I have a fairly uneducated opinion on this because I don't know much about sort of the way the system moves, other than I think that there's much more appetite now for the same reasons. Like once you are forced into a situation and then realize, oh, that worked really well, it seems harder to fight for the way it was and find some compelling reason that it needs to remain that way.
It sounds like these structures that are in place and the incentives are the metaphoric big ship that needs to be shifted and are the things that are preventing us. I mean, in this case, where it's a new technology like programmable viruses, are those incentives at play? Like, I guess if like healthcare companies are getting reimbursed for like antibiotics at like a set rate every time they use it, and it's like, well, are we going to be able to get the same rate for like this new programmable virus? Like that's where we get conflict in how we decide to roll these things out.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's ultimately like whoever stands to not profit from the change will have a lot of money to put behind lobbying against that change, especially changes as large and widespread as this. I think there would be a lot of money against that. So yeah, I'm faith in incentives always. Economic incentives, not human level incentives.
Yeah, no, for sure.
If you could step back and think about what's possible with the idea of being able to program a virus to be really, really specific in what it fights, I mean, that could be a massive shift in cancer treatment, right? In all kinds of things that have seemed intractable. But yeah, again, like who wouldn't want that to be the case?
Does a programmable virus then take on a life of its own and adapt and mutate and become something that we didn't program it to do?
I have no idea. It's beyond my understanding of the subject. From the article, from reading it, it sounds like they are programmed to serve single use cases and they operate within those bounds. Where that starts to go off the rails, I have no idea. It's a good
because that's
bring a
basically
scientist on next time.
That's the premise of every apocalyptic movie, right? Is that we like created something and it worked, and then it had like basically it's Terminator. Like what we're talking about is Terminator.
Yeah.
Children of men, but same.
Okay, let's move on to the next one. Before we do, let's go to our cartoonist and see what she has for this wonderful section.
This is a pretty hard one.
It's a tricky one.
Yeah, you only got one this time too.
It's more than I could do in the entire session.
Can you see it?
No.
No.
Strange.
Open. Do you see Procreate? Oh, it's opening now.
Saw it for a second.
I'm restarting it.
Okay. Yeah. That's awesome. I'm going to share all these cartoons afterwards as well. Cool. Let's move on to last topic. Oh, also, I forgot to remind you guys, guests, that we're going to play a small game after this. If you guys have, all you need is paper and a pen, if you have one handy.
Let's see if I do.
I'll make do with something.
Are you? Yeah. Okay.
I'm in the middle of my son's bedroom.
You know what? You can use like rock paper scissors style fingers.
Yeah.
Oh,
do something.
More fun actually. Maybe we'll just do that.
We'll do interpretive dance.
Cool. So this last one is about Around, which is a video conferencing system that launched last week. They were number one on PodPlan. They're basically supposed to be the next generation of video conferencing. So unlike Zoom or WebEx, which we're using here today, the idea is that it doesn't dominate the screen. It also allows you to video chat in the same room as others. Our cartoonist is hiding away in a different room because there was so much echo coming from the microphone. So instead of being huddled around one same computer while you're trying to do a meeting with a team, we've all been in that. You're able to each sit at your own computer. So they launched with a ton of fanfare. What was interesting to me was you think about Zoom and like the head start they have. Like I saw a tweet the other day about how Zoom's market cap today is greater than all of the major airlines combined. when you have a company that has such a grand head start and like has like turned the process of meeting into a verb, is there white space for a new company so soon? And I'll open that up to anyone. Is it weird for an investor to place a bet on something like this when there's already a company like Zoom that seems to be crushing it, as they say?
I mean, I'm not an investor, but if I could just jump in, I'd say absolutely, because what we're seeing now, and I'm really excited to see all this kind of stuff, is such so many more use cases and so much more market demand for this kind of service that of course people are going to start innovating and figuring out what kind of problems exist with the existing services. I mean, Zoom is popular, but what, Zoom is largely just a better version of the kind of thing that we've had for quite a while. I haven't seen a big rethink on this kind of video conferencing technology. So I love the idea of seeing completely different ways that this can settle in. And I think the more that we are shifting the way that we're working, the more we're going to need more and more solutions for the many different kinds of people who are doing it.
I'm kind of two minds. I agree for sure that there's room for something new, because in the way that Zoom was the new thing, there was already, all kinds of video conferencing solutions, and there'll be more. I wonder though, like on the one hand, I think something that makes some of the things in Zoom that are difficult easier, like collaborating on a piece of work, right? So being in different places and, because we can screen share and that's fine. So there's probably room for fixing some of those problems and doing it better. But I've also felt myself this week, like how many different web conferencing things am I using? How many different remote collaboration softwares can I use? I start to get confused and you're competing. You show up in the wrong, well, I show up in the wrong meeting place at the wrong time sometimes. So I don't know how fractured it can get before it's just like good enough is good enough.
Yeah, I think that all these remote work tools are being propped up by all this work from home right now in this pandemic, or do you think that this has just been a catalyst for the level of adoption that we've all been expecting? Like, is it that this just sort of kickstarted all of the work from home remote future that a lot of people have been predicting, or is this going to fade as Corona hopefully soon starts to fade as well?
Yeah, I think it's kind of what a lot of people said on Twitter, which is like, we could be actually hurting the remote work case, because once we all can unquarantine, you might see people that were kind of pushed into being remote workers and didn't have the right setup structurally in their companies, et cetera, and that could be net negative for like the remote work use case. But I think that ultimately it comes down to like, can someone build a platform for video? Where right now all we have is products. Zoom has an API; it's like getting better. But there aren't very many extensions to these types of things. And so I don't think you'll see a truly a truly well-moded video company until you see one that becomes a platform. And you could argue that those that have large distribution have only done that from a social use case and not an enterprise use case. And so we'll have to see if Zoom actually becomes a platform, or around, or other things do instead.
I've seen those tweets as well about people not being properly set up for remote work, not being really into it. But you'd have to think now, like 2 weeks in, of like wearing pajamas every day and like being able to like eat snacks throughout the day. Like, I don't know, maybe people will feel differently after this. What do you guys think?
I think we're in a period of adjustment, and also not all work needs to be remote in a world in which we have options. But I think here's a case study of one. The president of Entrepreneur Media, which is the creator of Entrepreneur Magazine, has never really loved the idea of work from home, because he likes people being in the office and able to communicate, and has always doubted that everybody can be as productive at home. But now he keeps talking about how amazed and impressed he is about the level of communication that our team has, and he's starting to think differently about what our office is going to be, and what kind of office needs we even have once we come back. And it's just been fascinating to see that evolution happen so fast. And so I think that you scale that out, and maybe not everybody's working remotely all the time, but maybe companies have just 2 days in the office. Whatever the case is, I think we're just going to see a fracturing of the kind of ways that we work, and there are going to be lots of needs for different tools to support it.
Awesome. We're going to move on to the game. Before we go to the last cartoon of the afternoon, cartoonist, hit us with what you got.
Ready? All right. Oop. Hold on. Sorry. A second feature.
Yeah, we need that.
Oh, that's awesome.
Really boosting productivity.
Yeah. Cool. We'll switch to quick game. So for this game, I've got 4 headlines. 3 of them are real. 1 of them is fake. So don't anyone say anything. We're going to do it all at the same time. I'm going to read out all 4. And then once I've read them out, we'll do like a countdown, and then we can like you guys, because I know which one's fake, can like rock, paper, scissors to display which one you think is the fake one. So the first one is: professor transforms into virtual anime schoolgirl to motivate his online class. Second one is: researchers use AI to calculate safest times to leave house for groceries. The third one is: TikTok guidelines say not to promote posts by ugly and poor users. And the fourth one is: porn star says that she'll have sex with scientists who find coronavirus vaccine. So we'll do rock, paper, scissors, and on the third, just give a finger indication of which one you think is the fake headline of the 4. So, you guys ready? Rock, paper, scissors.
Oh yeah.
Mhm. That's
I
the
felt
fake one.
I felt most confident that number 4 was correct.
Number 4 was indeed correct. All the other 3 ones came from this week's newsletter. The second one is the fake one. Good job. Last week, actually, everybody had mixed results. No one knew which one was the fake one or the real one, which was interesting to see.
Number 2 is also the most mundane, so it was kind of
Yeah. The other ones just all seemed so plausible.
I'll come up with some more outrageous ones for next week. Thanks so much for joining today, guys. That was awesome. Just a reminder to everyone who's watching, all the headlines we talked about today came from This Week in Creative Tech. And if you want to get weekly headlines like the ones we discussed, you can sign up at bit.ly, join Future Fridays. That was super fun, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks a lot. It was super fun.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Ciao.